Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us today. I'm Janita from the .hq and I'll be the moderator for this session. I hope I'm audible, everyone. If I could just get a thumbs up. Awesome. So if you're here, chances are you're hiring or trying to, and you felt the pain. So today we're diving into what's really going on with the talent crunch, what's not working, and how offshoring is helping businesses in the US scale sustainably, of course, without burning out their teams. I'm joined by two fantastic speakers today who live and breathe this every day. We have Gavin Snedden, Accounts Director at the .hq. He's helped a dozen firms build reliable offshore support when local hiring just wasn't cutting it for them. And we also have Hem Bora, Strategic Advisor, Dharma Consulting. He's in the trenches daily, working with business leaders in the US, helping them build and grow their offshore teams that actually work. So, without wasting any further time, let's jump straight into this. Hem, over to you.
Yeah, so I think first to kick this off, let's start with, what are the US resourcing challenges currently and what I'm seeing in the market with the various clients I'm working with on day-to-day basis, right? So currently, there is a major shortage of corporate accounting roles in US, especially areas like bookkeeping, accounts payable, standard accountants, general ledger work, and that's primarily driven by just fewer people entering the profession, right? And a lot of the experienced staff is aging and at the age of retirement, right? So a lot of the companies are struggling backfilling the existing roles that are retiring on top of the new roles that are being created as the economy is growing. Especially with last 2 3 years with the AI booms, right? So a lot of small businesses, a lot of small companies are popping up, right? So they are really struggling with these standard accounting roles, and it's not because the salaries is not there, right? So salaries have gone up. They've done everything they could to fulfill, but it has actually made it worse because now there is another issue, which is turnover, right? So everybody's looking and scavenging. So then people are there's a huge turnover, and then as a result, the team morale and efficiency goes down because there's constant turnover in the teams. And then while there's a turnover, there's a transition period to hire a new person, right? Or training. So then the current staff is getting burned out or being overworked, right? So they're currently not being happy. So it's like a overarching problem that everybody's facing. Now, now this problem is, mostly I focus and my specialty and my passion is more towards small and mid-sized businesses because the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world, they don't have this problem, right? They are much larger organizations. But what happens is when there's a small, mid-sized company that's been around for a smaller period, 5 to 10 years, they have a bigger challenging issues when stuff like this is happening because they don't have the capacity to resource talent globally, right? They're kind of constrained by their local region, sometimes local offices historically. And on top of that, they're also struggling with certain just not being able to attract talent because they're not that big brand name, right? So people are not looking to work for them, right? So for all of them, what I've really seen is in the last 2 3 years, since we've kind of seen that remote work has worked after COVID, now everybody is kind of remote or hybrid mode. People are comfortable with that model. This is where I feel that offshoring model comes into the play to help into the market because this not only allows the teams to um, scale and efficiently build their team faster, but gives them an ability to have talent pool from all over the world, right? They're not constrained. Just because you're a 50 or 100 employee company or 200 employee company, you're not constrained to only have resources from certain region. You're now able to do that, right? And then I think I do want to kind of specify when I talk about offshoring is different from outsourcing, right? So offshoring is where you are building your team globally your team, your people who work for you directly, but they just sit in a different office, right? They're designated to you. Outsourcing is where you're just giving out work and just say, you just do it and give it back to me, right? To me, that model has not worked. And I don't think it's a long-term model because the focus should be on quality, efficiency, not on cost or just being able to offload your dirty work right to somebody else. So I think that's the main resourcing challenge is how do you navigate this economic uh, times that we live in, right? And how everybody has NBA struggles, everybody has margin struggles, everybody's looking for EBITDA. But at the same time, there's a bigger problem is how do you run your day-to-day operations smoothly, right? So I think that's where kind of this offshoring model comes into place, where it gives people an ability to keep their day-to-day operations running and focusing on their talented team members to focus on more value-added work and kind of giving them more responsibility to focus more on growing the business, right? So I think that's been my assessment so far, but I'd love to hear from you, Gavin. Like, what are your thoughts? What's kind of not working, or what have you seen currently that's kind of sticking out to you?
Yeah, yeah, sure, and good inputs as well, Hem. I think quite right. It's a case of there is a struggle right now. When you look at the profession, there's not the talent pool out there. I think coping up with that, you've got, I say talent pool, you haven't got a localized talent pool, wherever UK, Ireland, US, Canada. Um, Looking at businesses and how they've tried to navigate that more immediately has been a case of either pushing the existing resource, the existing team, the onshore team to their sort of uppermost limits, which is only going to lead to one thing and burnout and then eventually churn. You've also got kind of more short-term kind of stopgap options, bringing in kind of temporary staff, which again they're not integrated into the system, so then they're not fully immersing themselves in the kind of the business and the culture. So yeah, it's definitely one that I've seen, and these short term kind of options that are the kind of quick band-aid to put it over it. It's a case of there needs to be more of a long-term solution to this. And I think, yeah, quite rightly on like outsourcing of old, and where it then leans into offshoring. I think outsourcing, yes, very much that kind of transactional piece that doesn't have that kind of long-term vision, with that kind of structured integration. It also, with those short-term gaps or short-term kind of plugs, you haven't got then the consistency and the quality as well. Obviously, if you're facing staff with burnout, then it's a case of the quality is going to drop. You're going to see churn, which obviously with the churn, if you've got a high rate of churn on staff and turnover of staff, that comes with a cost as well. If you're recruiting externally with recruitment fees, etc., the time investment in onboarding those new members when seeing them go in quick succession, then it's not the long-term growth kind of support mechanism that you need. So that's when, yes, onto the offshoring model. That's when you start to look at the long-term structured growth mechanism that can offer that to basically achieve your growth aspirations for the business. But what?
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's interesting that, yeah, it's interesting because it's a global issue, right? You're based in London, I'm here in
yeah,
States, but we're all kind of feeling the same kind of constraints and issues with our clients when we're trying to support them, right? Uh, so with your experience with .hq, like what do you suggest that what do you think is a smarter alternative, right? Working in this field for years, right? Um, why is it a smarter, and why is it that you think that this is helpful, especially for, like I said, my focus is more on small and mid sizes, right? Why is it such a good option to navigate the issues we just talked about? All right.
Yeah, so obviously with that coming off the back of that kind of localized talent search, I think what you do is in an offshoring model, you open yourself to a far bigger reach of talent. Uh,
Yeah.
that localized talent pool is dwindling. So by offshoring, you are dipping into a whole other market of talent. Um, with that, with the offshoring specifically, it becomes the model is of a fully integrated model. So it's like your staff onshore, obviously offshore, integrated, running as per your systems on your softwares, following your standards, and you're able to ramp it up. You can ramp it up as per the demand in the market. If you're trying to win business with the growth aspirations of the company, you can reach out, scale up on demand. Um, the integration piece is key because then you're avoiding what you would have seen on the kind of stopgap solutions. You've got that level of consistency you're building. You've got that continuity of a member when you're looking into that offshore side of things. Um, versus outsourcing of old, the transactional piece, it's still there. Offshoring and outsourcing kind of run complementary each other. You might have seasonal peaks where you might have to dip into and kind of cater for that peak. So if you've got a nice consistent base of resource in an offshore model, you can then dip into that outsource piece for the peaks. So yeah, yeah, but I'm sure you've got some good examples of
Yeah.
seeing it in the flesh and some success stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I can talk about that, but I think before I just do want to add that I do want to ask a question on what you just talked about. What do you think on the timing piece, right? Because uh, I'm assuming at least in my experience, I feel the timing is also a big factor for small mid-sized companies, right? If they have a need, if they want to fill something, I feel that hiring a full-time resource in the US with all the legalities, and also just interviews process, benefits,
Mhm,
signups, and it's a much a longer plan versus I feel
mhm.
like I think offshoring, I hope you would agree with me, but I think that's one thing that offshoring gives us is also an ability to churn things up quicker than you would internally hiring them yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah. It also becomes like a self-sufficient recruitment process in itself. So not only are you out the term outsourcing the kind of some of the HR aspect in that kind
Yeah,
of sense in the recruitment process. Um, Once you've established that offshore setup, it's a case of that can run self-sufficiently. You're ramping up sort of 5, 10, 15, 20 members and more. And ultimately your onshore team haven't then got to invest that time to scale that on the resourcing side.
yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's an important factor, right? So like I'll share some of my examples because again, I work with various clients who have kind of adopted this model, right? And I think and I'll give you examples from all different industries, right? Because I think this model fits every industry. But generally, I had a client and an old colleague who was really, really struggling to fill an AP and an AR role. Like they're in a very, very growth heavy company, meaning they
Mhm.
were acquiring, merging, private equity backed, and not only they were growing organically, but they were also growing through acquisitions, right? So when that was happening, usually there's always immediate need for day-to-day transactional people, right? AP, AR. and billing, AR billing considered to be same for me, right? So
Yeah.
so now the issue that they were facing is when they were looking in the talent pool, they were getting either people who were near retirement, who were looking for more kind of relaxed, something to do, activity kind of role, which it didn't fit their company. Their company was just too fast. They were just growing at a pace where it wasn't a right fit for some of those resources, or there were resources who were very junior, where they just didn't have the experience, where you would have to handhold, train them into these roles, right? Like recent graduates. Um, so at any ways, they were not getting the right slot of people what they're looking for, people between 5 to 6 years of experience, right, for these roles. So they have enough background in their knowledge, but not enough to be at a manager level or whatnot, right? So I had talked to him and I said, would you be open to kind of look into this model, right? Now they have not and ever done this. So they're a company that they have like 100 employees. They were clearly growing, but they did not have any global presence. They didn't have any global entity outside of US, right? So when I first tell this to them, the first response that I got from them was, well, we don't have an entity there. How do we do it? Right? Because that was the traditional way, right? You had to go to India, open up an office, and then hire somebody to build up your team, right? But now I told them you don't have to do that, right? There are companies out there. This is called the offshoring model, and they adopted it, right? We implemented it. We did it in a timing much faster than they would have done internally hiring them, and they got the right employees with that sweet spot they were looking for, between 4 to 6 years of experience, right? So they're not totally fresh, but they're also not seniors, right? And they were able to find these talents through an interview process. Obviously, this goes through accordingly. They were able to find the right characteristic, right? Because they wanted somebody who were kind of go-getters, right? Because the company is like that. The company is kind of is in that startup growth trajectory. So they wanted people with that mindset. Well, this model allowed them to do that because there was a wider talent pool to pick from, right?
Hmm.
So uh, I think for them, definitely offshoring wasn't a cost decision. It was really a decision because they just couldn't find the talent they were looking for. So I think that's the important
At the
point.
pace, at the pace that they needed.
And at the pace that they needed the roles to be filled, right? Another example is I had another client through a friend. I was introduced to them. They were in the hospitality business, right? So they owned multiple rental properties, multiple hotels, hotel management companies, right? And they were, well, they're all as separate entities, obviously, because they're small businesses, but they're all owned by him, right? Eventually, so they were primarily just relying on their accountant to to do all of their bookkeeping, financials, and all of that, right? Now he called me and he said, I need to find a solution. I said, what happened? He said, my accountant is still not done with my taxes, and I don't know how to do my tax strategies. I don't have the data to be able to plan for, what my tax strategies are going to be. I don't know that until I know how much I'm going to make this year, right? So this is a very, very simple example on how offshoring can work for anybody, right? So they use this model to hire their own accountant within their team. Now they've never had it. They never thought this would be possible, right? But this model now allows them to do that. Now they have a fully designated employee and now hopefully another one soon. But the idea is that he's building out his own accounting structure and not relying on his accountant, which is what most small businesses do. But now
Hmm.
he's getting to a stage where that's just not enough for him. But now, if he were to do that in US, right, I think he couldn't afford it,
Hmm.
right? And so I think reason I speak about both of these examples is because it can be a choice for cost purposes for a small company where there is a need for this role, but there's no budget for it. then this is a
Mhm,
good option because it's going to be a much cheaper and efficient alternative. But
mhm,
it's also extremely relevant that this model is extremely important for ensuring you're hiring the right person, whether that person sits in US, India, China, Europe, wherever, right? So this offshoring model allows you the flexibility of both, right?
mhm.
Which I think is what makes it very, very important. And the other thing that, like the other company that I worked for, I think their biggest challenge adopting this model was really focusing on, well, how do we make sure this is going to work? Because
Mhm.
everybody's had bad experience with the old outsourcing option, right?
Yeah,
So everybody's
yeah.
saying, well, the quality is not going to be there. We've tried this before. We've struggled in my previous company, right? So
Mhm,
that's where one of my client was in that boat. Like they have done it. They've had a bad experience with that old model, right? Before
mhm.
COVID.
But
And
it's not the
then
same model, right? It's not. It's
it's not
not
the
like
same.
for
It's
like.
not the same model anymore,
Yeah.
right? So then I had to like explain to them that listen, the way I look at offshoring is like you had said, Gavin, is you are building out your own team that just doesn't sit in the same states you're in. Okay. So you're pretty much hand picking the people you want and working with them in they're working in your system just like your employees. So as long as you hire the right people and if we and based on most of the offshoring companies they give wide range of resumes to pick from and interviews, right? So it really is just like hiring within your company, right? I think people when they think about offshoring they automatically think of outsourcing where they're just saying we're just going to give the work away and the job's going to go, right? It's not the
Yeah.
thing. It's you're integrating these people into your company. The only difference is they don't officially are part of the company because your company doesn't have an entity in that country or region,
Mhm,
right? But
mhm.
other than that, they are your employees. They work with you. They will work within your culture, and you can train them and work with them how you would work with any other employee within the company. Now, this was a very, very new relevation for that person because traditionally when he was in a larger company they had an option where what they would do is they would more of just offshore roles and then they'll just say you figure it out, right?
Mhm.
I think that's the mindset that creates bad quality. Okay, if you're going to do this successfully you have to think about it based on what we're talking about. They are part of your team. They're just not
Yeah,
sitting.
yeah. The integration needs to be
You can't
seamless
say, oh,
versus onshore.
right. You can't be in a mindset to say, let them do what they're doing. No,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
your
It's not a
team.
them and us kind of
Right.
scenario.
Yeah,
It's an
exactly.
us.
And that's what historically outsourcing model created. Them and us. They weren't never really together. Right.
Mm,
So this is where like this webinar is important because I think that problem is being solved because them and us never works. Right. They need to work together. And I think this model
mhm.
allows them to do that. Um, but yeah, I think that's been my kind of big experience.
Yeah. No, and
Love to
it's
hear
some good. It's some
what you
good.
guys.
It's some
Yeah,
good case studies and kind of yeah, live success stories on it. I think yeah, look, I get it where there's a perception of old with outsourcing. Like I said, it's not one and the same. The model's changed, it's developed. It is a new model in the offshoring side of things. I've seen it. Um, I've seen it happen with a mid-sized kind of CPA firm. They were at a point where goes against every grain in their body, but they were turning away work because
right.
they just didn't have the buns on seats and resource to get it done.
Mhm.
Are you going to want to go out and tender for work, knowing that you know,
Yeah,
ultimately you're not going to be able to get the output and get the quality of work out there. So yeah, obviously hitting that roadblock, they had to do something. So they looked at the offshoring model. They were able to scale up a team of 6 who was integrated and adopted like their own, like mirroring their resourcing and onshore kind of culture. They were then able to take that over in the offshoring model, integrate the staff. So they had those knowledge build, that consistency across that team of 6. And then again, as I touched on previously, with the outsourcing as kind of complementary to it. That's the beauty of it. You've got your kind of self-sufficient offshore team there, who, when I say self-sufficient, there's still the link between them, but very much they know what they're doing. They've become exposed and they're trained on your systems. Adding to that in kind of seasonal workflow kind of sense, the beauty of that outsourcing it, you've got the offshore knowledge base there. So when it comes to peak time, there's then sort of a trust built with that offshoring partner that you can then flex as the business requires through peak season, whether it be peak tax season. You can then dip into extra resourcing for that kind of shorter term. So I'm not saying that outsourcing is dead and buried. I think it's very much can run complementary to the offshoring model. Offshoring model is the more efficient, but yeah, I've seen it. Like I said, with the CPAs turning away work, they were able to extend their reach, adopt it, and integrate it with positive outcomes and a good scale up of the team. So yeah, I think, like as you said, there's a lot of skepticism around offshoring because it's so closely linked to outsourcing. Maybe people have had their fingers burnt in the past with that more transactional model, but yeah, totally. As you said, obviously this webinar is great for uncovering some kind of insights to the new model and all new support options that are available to businesses and firms.
And absolutely, you bring up a very good point, right? CPAs, right? I think that is an area where I think that's one industry that can totally should be leveraging a lot of offshoring than outsourcing, right? I think because the amount of work and the capacity that they need, it's just not being fulfilled with the talent pool that's in US, right? The data is there, right? There is just less and less students going into accounting schools every year, right? That means there's going to be less and less talent available in the future, right? So if you're really in that business, if any of our listeners, they really should be looking into this model, because if not now, 5 to 10 years from now, you're going to have major labor constraints. So you might as well start strategizing and building this model out so you can, like you said, continue to scale and grow and not have to turn away clients, right? That'd be the worst thing you want. You don't have staff, you to turn away clients, right? And I think the other thing that we didn't talk about before we give Mark, I won't give you some time for takeaways as well, Gavin, after, but one of the things that we didn't talk about is also that not only it allows the teams to kind of integrate, grow, and strategize, but it also allows them to have an on-demand support from their offshoring partner, right? So let's say if a company is growing, right? They have an immediate resource they can tap into and say, hey, Gavin or Hem or Janita, we just bought this company, we want to buy this. We're going to need 3 more people, right? Now, that's a strength that the small business did not have before, right? You don't have to go ahead and hire an HR person. You have to go build an entity in a country. So there's a huge benefit on top of just getting the talent, but you're also getting a very, very good partner with the offshoring company you're partnering with, right? They're going to be working hand in hand with you to fulfill your needs, right?
Mhm.
Which usually for a small company, there's not a lot of support out there. It's like a one-man team or two-man team. You know what I mean? There's just few leaders trying to do everything. So the more
Mhm.
people that they can have, the better decisions, better strategies, better plans they can make, right? So I think the other thing that the offshoring model brings in is it brings in a strong partner who thinks in the same mindset as you. They're not in a mindset of the traditional straight up outsourcing model where they just
Mhm.
want to take care of it. Can they do it? Right?
Mhm.
It's more of a collaborative environment, right? Where these offshoring partners now are working with you as a partner to help you solve your problem, not to just take your work away. And so we could do it cheaper, right? That's not the
Yeah.
model, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Which I
yeah,
think is an
yeah.
important
It's the
topic to talk
growth,
about.
isn't it? It's not the building in the cost. It's not just hinged on the cost saving benefit.
That's
It's
right.
the which maybe it was 15 sort of years prior, not even as long ago as that. But I think
Yeah,
now it's the growth enabler, and I think
right.
to add to your point, I think it's a case of if you have a offshoring partner, trusted partner that isn't just a pigeonholed kind of solution, i.e., kind of just on the accounts of finance. You if you widen that up and you've got a diverse kind of service offering of you know multi-spoked resource talent,
Mhm.
i.e., if you're a business and you're looking to expand, not just bringing in your own offshore accounts and finance
Right.
individuals, if you're looking at also, I don't know, sales and marketing, or if you're looking at on the data analysis side, depending on what sector, what kind of industry you're in, it also then opens up, okay, onshore
Right.
you might not have the expertise, so then you can then you know diversify your own, albeit not onshore but
Yeah.
offshore resourcing
Yeah.
to those particular kind of skills areas. So yeah, it's not just a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
It is, sorry, it is a one-stop shop.
Exactly. And for the companies, from the organization morale point of view, you are if as you're growing, if you're able to use this offshoring team and kind of transition some of the work from your seasoned employees, you're then giving them a path to grow. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because that's usually the biggest resistance with small businesses, that employees generally don't see how to grow further,
Mhm.
right? By doing this, you're also kind of creating a positive morale with the employees to say, you know what, you've been doing this for 5 years. I think you know the business more. Somebody else can do this. I would like you to spend your time on this instead because you're adding more value. Now, that's not
Mhm.
only good for the business, but it's also extremely good for that person's growth,
Yep,
right? And
definitely.
morale. So I think
Mhm.
that's another big thing that people don't think about. People just think that person's doing it, let them do it. But like we're all human beings. Everybody gets sick of doing the same thing over and over again, right? We all want to see growth, we all want to learn, we all want to progress. And how do you do that if you're a small company? Right?
Mhm.
You do that by, I think this offshoring model works tremendously for those kind of companies, because then the roles that have been kind of day to day stable for 3, 4, 5 years, they can easily be then offshored with the team, somebody managing them, overseeing them. And then that person can actually, now they know the industry, the company, the business so much more. They can contribute in so many different ways, right?
Yeah, in a higher level
Add more value.
strategic kind of
Right,
level.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which
Um,
adds more value, right? And I think,
that's more
yeah, it's a
value.
case of
And
the succession piece that is an enabler of
exactly,
that succession of the onshore. I think you touched on it
right.
earlier with the succession part, but yeah, no, it becomes an enabler in that sense, which ultimately, again, um, incentivizes the onshore team, brings in the
Right.
value there, and ultimately then leads to less of that churn, which we touched on earlier.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think there's some key takeaways
Yeah.
um, that I would say to any firm, which I've seen successfully, and I think some key ones is for any company embarking on this journey, whether it's second time around after having fingers burnt the first time, or those that are completely green to it. I think it's establishing the objectives that want to be achieved, and stating those out from the outset. The reasons why you're doing this. Is it a case of, growing the company, bringing on that new business and ultimately resourcing for it, or alleviating the work pressures and time demands of the existing onshore team? So going through that and kind of setting out the objectives clearly. It might be a cost saving exercise. I think that's more, as we touched on, that's of an older kind of incentive to go down this route. But I think it's more about the kind of alleviating of pressure and growth trajectory moving forward to cope up with it. Process mapping. I think process mapping is key. I think it should be there anyway in businesses, without outsourcing. If someone's to leave the company, onshore or offshore, it should be clearly defined there, and the workflows, tasks, roles clearly defined, so there is the map, the go-to, so that both people, or both sets. I know it's an us mindset, but the offshore onshore, it should be clear as day in that mapping. The integration strategy. So I think we touched on it earlier, but I think taking as closely as possible the integration process that any business would have with an onshore staff member, mirror that to an offshore sense as closely as possible. Some may be able to do it to a T, but I've seen it whereby to fully integrate and build that culture across onshore, offshore. We've seen it whereby obviously it's hard for offshore members to be inclusive of, say, team building exercises, but there is ways to get around that and still have that inclusive piece for the offshore team, even setting up social functions and team building for the offshore team that run alongside that schedule onshore. So I think, that adoption, that integration as closely as possible to the onshore kind of process, which then ties into the training and onboarding. I mean, most training, yes, the in-person probably has more impact, but there's no reason why you couldn't have offshore visit you onshore and go through training like that. And the flip of that, there's no reason why you couldn't have your onshore, say, managers visit your offshore team. Gives them a chance to get embraced in the culture and get that in-person kind of experience, because that goes a long way. But I think the training, even if it's remotely, just mirror it as you would internally. No doubt a lot of firms and businesses are doing it remotely anyway, with, if they've hired team members who aren't in their city, but they're in their state and they're working from home, the platforms are already set up for it and no doubt accessible in an offshore sense. And performance metrics, I think, again, that ties into how you would run it internally. It should already be there for onshore staff. Clearly defining KPIs and benchmarks to monitor frequently and regularly for your offshore guys, like you would onshore, exactly as you would with your offshore team, because not only to develop but celebrate their successes where they are doing well, further incentivize. So I'm sure covering those points, any
Yeah.
business that's going to implement those points is going to do well in their offshoring journey.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think you summed it up very well because you talked about a lot of things, right? So this is a great point to kind of end with. I do want to add just one more thing as a listener also, right? I think one of some of the feedback that probably me and you always get is also I think the reason why this model works really well is people always get scared then, okay, we hire an offshoring team, now then I have to hire a manager to oversee them, right?
Mhm,
So I always tell them that it's not like if you're hiring one or two people, they're being integrated to your current manager. Okay. So you don't need to hire a manager. But I think the beauty of this model, which is different from outsourcing, is you can build that hierarchical model in your offshoring team. So you could have an accounting manager that where there is a 5 people within the accounting team that report to him, right?
mhm,
And that manager directly reports to your controller or assistant controller or manager in US, right? So I think it gives them. I think it's important to talk about this because it's not a model where you can just it's a very adaptable model where you can build it the way you think it'll work for your company because every company is different, everybody's working style is different.
mhm,
So I think that's a good point that I wanted to bring up because that we did do that with one of my clients, right? That we they really wanted to they didn't want it to just have hire 3 people and let them be on their own. So they thought
mhm,
we should also have a manager to oversee them because then
mhm,
that's a more complete team,
mhm,
right? And a more long-term solution to this.
mhm,
And then the manager brings in more strategic views, efficiencies, and a lot of other things as well on top of
mhm.
that.
Yeah,
So,
I think
I
that way
won't,
it's more efficient and self-sufficient as well. I think
right.
you've got one leader in an offshore sense, who's then
Someone leaning at
liaising
that,
with
yeah.
one senior member on an
That's right.
onshore side,
That's right.
rather than 3 individuals liaising with two,
That's right.
3 individuals in an onshore side.
That's right. Right. It's a longer term structure that will you'll succeed. It's not like a
Mhm,
band-aid, right? The other thing is like a band-aid. You had a need, you hired 3 people, you took them in, right?
mhm,
But at some point, I think this is also another option, which if you're really looking for long-term growth, this model allows you to do that without giving up on um, you know employee morale, make sure everybody's feeling good about the company, the communication is great, all of that is
mhm.
covered up. But I know, Janita, you're looking at us, we're talking and talking, we're up on time, so we'll let you kind of lead
I'm
us
just
back.
being conscious of the time here and for the
Yes.
participants we have. All right, so thank you so much. That was really insightful. I want to quickly open it up for some questions. So, to our audience, feel free to pop yours into the chat. And while we wait for some questions to come in, I just want to get started with a few common questions we often hear. So, since we have a very few minutes left, we can just quickly wrap up with a few questions. The first one coming your way is, how do I know what roles to offshore first?
I'll take that one, Gavin, if you don't mind.
Dive
I
in.
think I touched upon some of these things already. One is, are you finding the person you want onshore, right? Or are you so I think you want to make sure that the talent you're hiring is available and you're getting the right person. So, right. So number one is if you're not finding the person you want in onshore, then obviously that's the number one reason to go offshore, right? The other reason which roles to offshore or what types, I think it really um, depends on your, like you said, how well documented you are also on certain roles, right? Do you have somebody who can train that person? Do you have proper documentation to offshore? Is it more of a uh, is there a structure in place within your team that can spend some initial time to train up the person? Then it's going to successfully work, right? And I think overall my consensus is there are 3 reasons you can't find a person, then you should offshore. If you desperately need some work done, but you don't have the budget, then let's face it, you should really be looking at offshoring as well, because economically speaking, yes, that's another option as well. And then the third is really, I think it is being able to be global for a small company to start this global approach, right? Like I said, it doesn't start with just accounting roles. It can expand into many, many roles in the future, but you have to start and build that infrastructure out first. So, is it in your vision to grow? And if your vision is to grow your company, then you should definitely be thinking about offshoring, because that's going to be the key for you to grow your company.
All right, we have one other question in the chat here. How long does onboarding typically take? Gavin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Onboarding. I think this highlights one of the beauty of it, of offshoring. That is, I think, look, it can be a case of identifying a need for a resource and having that individual occupying that role within a matter of days. I know the process being that similar to that of a recruitment. Obviously, with the offshoring partnership, we would take up the responsibility of that recruiter piece, see, without paying the extortionate percentages on top for each one. So from a matter of days to say a month, I think a lot hinges on the infrastructure on the business. As Hem touched on, are they ready? Are they ready? So I think it's a case of, as I said, with the takeaways, ensuring that you've got the role defined, the processes mapped, so that when that member or team come into play, they're off and running. I think what can be a stumbling block sometimes for some new businesses looking to do that, some on a kind of tech infrastructure, ensuring that they may not have a remote employee already onshore. So ensuring that tech piece is there and ready, so that these new offshore remote members can come in. That's probably the biggest stumbling block in the timelines of things, but it can be a matter of days for onboarding.
Okay, so since we don't have any more questions in the chat, I have one final question for you, Gavin, that we hear very often that our audience would love to know about is, what if they've had a bad offshoring experience before? I know Hem touched on this, but just from your perspective, what do you think?
If a business or firms had a bad experience before, I wouldn't tarnish it all with the same brush. There's some bad, there's some ugly, and there's also some good. It might well be that you weren't with the right partner. It might not have been on the right model. I think venturing on exploring a new potential partnership, just ensure you do your due diligence. I think if you're able to trial beforehand, to have a sample, to know that it's the right fit before going into any long-term relationship, you want to know that it's the right fit. So I think ensure you do your due diligence, get a good feel for the potential new partner, and yeah, I say don't paint it all with the same brush. It could be better. It could be better, I'm sure.
All right, Gavin, thanks so much for that. And so it's a wrap from our side. If you'd like to know or if you'd like to chat about what offshoring could look like for your business, drop us a message or book a strategy session with us. I've just put in the details in the chat, so if you could quickly copy that. And thank you once again for joining us today. And of course, thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Hem. Thank you for all the great insights you shared today. And take care. We'll see you soon. Have a lovely weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you
you,
all.
guys.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.